Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Honi Harawira. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā tātou katoa e te whare e noho tahi ana, e kōrero tahi ana ki tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira, kei mui a tātou I tēnei rā. Murere tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, National's education policies have just taken a major hammering in an international assessment which has heavily downgraded New Zealand students' achievements in maths, science and reading, and yet all a minister can do is trot out some irrelevant philosophical rubbish and tell the opposition to stop playing the blame game. But the ugly reality is, and I haven't heard people mention it too often, and somebody needs to say it, is that New Zealand's education ranking has fallen from 7th to 18th in science, from 13th to 23rd in maths, and from 7th to 13th in reading, according to a report released by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development last night. And yet this government point-blank refuses to accept that the deteriorating test scores and New Zealand dropping out of the top 10 are because of their out-of-touch education policies. The Programme for International Student Assessment, PISA, highlights the fact that National's approach has increased inequities between schools. It notes that the gap between test scores in high and low decile schools is bigger than ever before and ranks this country, New Zealand, firmly in the bottom third of OECD countries in terms of equity ratings. And yet, despite all of the government's hot air about lifting the achievement of all learners, and especially those in low decile schools, they've done precisely nothing to address the fact that poverty and inequality matter hugely to learning achievement. Instead, this government has done everything they can to entrench and exacerbate poverty and inequality, like cutting funding to early childhood education and state schools, while increasing funding to private schools and now charter schools, and grinding down the already low incomes and living conditions of struggling whānau. Mr. Speaker, this government continues to acknowledge the fact that refuse to acknowledge the fact that poverty and inequality matter at all, even though they have had ample evidence from experts about how important it is to address equity issues if they seriously want to address educational underachievement. For example, we know that government currently helps feed children through Kids Can and Kickstart, but we also know that 80,000 children are still going to school hungry. All of those children are our children, and they're going hungry, and we know because all of the facts tell us so, that hungry children of whatever race, colour or creed simply don't learn well. We know too that a government-funded food program, as spoken of in the PISA report in low decile schools, has been recommended as an immediate way to help address child poverty, raise educational achievement and improve child health by a range of groups and organisations right here in New Zealand in recent years, and most recently by the Children's Commissioner's Expert Advisory Group on Solutions to Child Poverty in their final report released in December last year. We know too that the Feed the Kids bill, whether it's mine or whether it's David Shearer's, aim to provide free meals to all students in decile 1 to 2 schools, and won broad support from groups and organisations right across the country, including Child Poverty Action, Every Child Counts, UNICEF New Zealand, Save the Children, IHC, the Methodist and Anglican churches, Te Ropu Wahine Māori Toko I Te Ora, NZEI, the PPTA, the New Zealand Principals Federation, the CTU Runanga, the New Zealand Nurses Association, and the Māori Medical Practitioners Association. And yet this government still refuses to acknowledge the importance of equity, of nutrition, and the need for a fully government-funded food in schools program. The PISA report also recommended increasing equity, increasing resources, and providing help for poor children, but this government has chosen to put its energy into other areas like national standards, private education, and charter schools. The PISA report pointed out that disadvantaged schools struggle to attract qualified teachers and that poor kids suffer as a result. It also pointed out the obvious fact that high-performing Countries, I haven't heard the bell, Mr. Speaker, pay teachers well and actually choose this as a policy priority over reducing class size, and that they also put a lot of focus into ensuring high-performing teachers actually get placed in socially disadvantaged schools. And yet what does this government do? They continue to blame teachers and the education system. They attack teachers' unions, criticise teacher standards, cut back on curriculum advisors, and even go so far as to suggest 6-year-old kids rape teachers, all the while paying those teachers through a broken overpay system, the sum result of which has been to confuse, confound and demoralise teachers, what was widely recognised as one of the best teaching collectives in the world. Tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
I call the Honourable Minister Anne Tolley.
Mr. Speaker,